Hey guys, it's Jason here. So I thought I would do, guys, a video on soldering. I often read, when I'm on Facebook groups and other groups, people that are just very scared to solder. And, they always make up excuses, but at the end of the day, they have never done soldering and people are afraid. So I thought, guys, I've got my Arrma BigRock. If you watched the last video, I just got it. I needed to replace the EC5 with an XT90. So I kind of thought, you know what, why not this will take a good time to do a video and kind of show at least how to solder up an XT90 connector. And to be honest, how easy it is, especially with the XT90s, guys. These things go together so easy. So first, I removed the EC5s. I just basically clipped them off, have a nice day. I feel like I should show my track power soldering station. I will say this much, guys, when it comes to soldering, if you go and you buy the cheapest soldering iron you can buy at, Canadian Tire, your little kind of, the little, sort of handy hobby kind of stores, they're garbage. And you will hate soldering even more with those. The heat is never, consistent. They will make you hate soldering. I've been doing this for a really, really long time, and I did that route for the longest time. I had the little cheap soldering irons, and then I bought a gun, which was supposed to be better, and it would make me curse and like I'd get angry. And one night, I'll take you guys just a minute just to explain this. One night, I was building up one of my brushless conversion fifth scale, so giant connectors, all that kind of stuff, and I was swearing and I was so mad because they just weren't going together right. My wife comes downstairs and she's just like, "What are you doing? I can hear you upstairs." And I'm like, I'm just having, shitty time soldering these things up. And my wife, being the awesome, girl that she is, she's like, "Well, is there something, we can do to make it better?" I said, "Well, I've always been told, buying these fancy, soldering stations are better. They're supposed to, hold the heat better and all that kind of stuff." But I said they're expensive, and, do I really need a expensive soldering station? Anyways, guys, long story short, my wife, get it. Here's a present. And I can honestly say, guys, buying that station, best thing ever. Because if you are in this hobby, guys, for a long time, you will be soldering connectors and soldering batteries and soldering everything forever and ever and ever. Invest in one. Anyways, guys, back to what we're here for. So I've already removed the EC5s. The one thing I did notice, guys, again, this is an XT90. Hopefully I can get this in focus. They're pretty deep connector, and you want the wire to sit, in there, but you don't want any of kind of the insulation on it because it'll just basically start to melt, especially when you're trying to solder it. So we're going to trim it back a little ways just so that it can kind of clear everything and there's nothing there. So I'm going to do that right now. So just going to remove a little bit more. Seems like such a large amount, but that I think will be good. This one could probably use a little bit more. Hopefully, guys, it's showing up on camera. It's over a little bit. That'll be a good fit. So deep, we can take a little bit more off. There. That's better, guys. That's what we want to see. So we're going to match that up with the other one. Now that we got this done, what we want to do, guys, is we want to get some solder on here, on those. Hopefully we're staying that in focus. So we're going to do that right now. Now, you don't need to do too much. basically you just want to kind of heat everything up. Just like that. There's one. Kind of hard to do this on camera. Come on. Being a little bit more not as cooperative. There we go. Okay, so that's done. One little kind of stray wire there. Okay, now guys, so you're doing XT90s. The one thing you want to do right away, it's the first thing I usually do, is this is part of the XT90 connector. It's actually the part that covers basically the open wires there. So it kind of sits like that. Make sure you put this on first. Make sure you leave the right end out. There's been a few times where I've actually made them and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh geez, I forgot to put that on. And you basically got to unsolder the connector. Now, this is the ESC. There's no battery here right now. These can touch, not a big deal. If you were making a battery, guys, you're soldering up a new connector on a LiPo or something, they cannot touch. When I do batteries, guys, I will leave I'll basically remove the wire from one part of the connector, and I'll leave the other connector, the insulation, the whole connector on, so that you cannot accidentally hit these guys together. If this was a battery right now, not so good. Okay, on an ESC, not a big deal. Now, XT90 square end, that's positive. The funky end, that's negative. I always, even though I've done up so many of these connectors, well, not as many XT90s, but just connectors in general, I'll always go back and just look at what I have and be like, oh yeah, okay, that is the way it goes. It is positive there and it is negative there, just so I know that I don't make a mistake, because that's the last thing you want to do. So we're going to start, I think we'll start with the negative. Now, obviously, I'm putting this in a vise. You're not cranking it down. You got to apply enough pressure that when you're pushing the wire on, it's not going to move all over the place, but you also don't want to break the connector either. So we take our solder. I do have a sponge over here, guys. You want to soak that. It's how you clean your tip. Probably the only time you'll ever clean your tip like that. But anyways, you put a bit of solder on it, and we're going to look at this. I don't know if this is going to show up on camera, but you can see the red. You can kind of see the positive is down here. This side is the negative. Working on the negative, so we're going to use this one right now. And we also want to make sure that as we're kind of getting this soldered on, that we're kind of have it in a natural, sort of way. You don't want the wires to be all kind of twisted up and be messy and stuff like that. So all we're going to do is we're just going to we're going to heat up the connector a bit. We're going to lay some solder in there. We're going to come back up to this. Again, we're going to use the negative. So we're going to go back. We're going to put that in. We're going to let that sit for a second. And we're going to remove it. And that's it, guys. It's in. I feel like I could have used a little bit more solder. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. It's going to be hard to do with only one hand, but kind of cheat here. Just get a little bit more solder in there. And then, guys, what I'll do is I'm just going to quickly touch it up a little bit. There you go, guys. One side's done. Negative's done. Now we're going to switch it over to the positive. All right, guys, I changed up the camera a little bit, just again to give you guys kind of a better angle. Hopefully I can still do what I need to do. Again, we're going to put some solder on the end, just a little bit. We're going to go to the bottom of the connector. Lay down some solder. These are pretty deep, and because this is a 110 scale system, guys, we've got a lot more wire than usual. If you were doing a bigger system right now, you know, you'd have a lot more wire, so it'd actually fill up the connector a little bit better. The other thing, guys, actually I want to make a note of too before I solder, you want to make sure, guys, that you kind of lay this in the way that the wire sits. So you wouldn't want the wire to be bent and be in there like that, just because it's going to make everything kind of funky. So you just kind of want to get an idea when you know you've laid your negative in like this. So you want it to be like this. So the way the box is sitting right now, you know what I mean, guys? So you don't want to be twisting it like this or anything. You want to lay it as natural as possible. So we're going to go back. I still got solder on the tip. We're going to heat that up. Lay this in. Just going to let all the solder kind of heat up. So the solder that's in the connector plus the solder that's actually in the wire. I can see it already getting wet. Well, wet. You know what I mean. And guys, again, I think I'm just going to lay a little bit more solder in there, but it's kind of hard the way the camera is right now, so I'm just going to turn this on. There, guys, I just moved the camera a bit, only because I was kind of, it was sort of, the tripod was sort of in the way of me just being able to do what I really needed to do here. I just want to get a little bit more solder in here. If you heard that, that's my dog. I'm just going to get a little bit more solder in there. Then go back, get that in there, let it heat up a bit, and we're good. There you go, guys. Just like that. That's in there. So you know what? I'm kind of glad that it went the way it did. It didn't go perfect. Soldering usually doesn't go perfect. One thing, guys, you want to do when you're done, clean the tip, make sure it's good to go. Remember to set your station off. But there, guys, just like that, we're good to go. It sits on there pretty nice. The wires are pretty good. We've got a good amount of solder, but it's not going anywhere. I usually wait for it to cool down a little bit before I move this up. Don't really know if I need to, but I always, for some reason, I do it that way. Anyways, guys, there you go. That's an XT90, soldering it up. Pretty easy on a system like this because you don't have, you have less wire. And because you have less wire, obviously getting the wire to sit in the the actual connector itself is a lot simpler. And, that's why, going with the larger connectors, big 8 scales, big 5 scales, they've always want these bigger connectors. They handle more amps. And since, I don't want to have XT90, XT60, Deans, all these kind of connectors lying around. So I usually pretty much get rid of them right away. And I just stick with one connector. I've had a few different ones over the years. And when I bought my Axial Wraith, it came with an XT90. Excuse me, guys. And I just really liked it. I actually, when I soldered it off, I was soldering up just a kind of like a temporary converter plug from an EC5 to an XT90 just so I could run it right away. I was like, wow, this is really easy to solder, even compared to the EC5s. And that was it. I fell in love with them. I like the way they feel. They're a pretty good grip. You slide up this little guy when you're done. Right here, it just kind of will lock in. It's harder to do when you're, on camera because nothing ever wants. There we go. And that's it, guys. So you guys can see. And that's it. That's how it looks when it's done. Now we can throw in any battery I want into the BigRock and I can start running it. So guys, I hope this helps. I hope, like I said, the video didn't go perfect, but I'm kind of glad it didn't, because soldering usually never does. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. and it makes things so much easier. And you don't have to run, I've seen people where they've got, they've got the ESC with, a Traxxas connector, and then they've got some conversion thing in the middle, and then it's going to the Traxxas battery with the Traxxas connector. Man, oh man, you are just asking for so many issues. Obviously, there's always a chance, that a battery can become unplugged. So by sticking, basically 1, 2, 3, 4 connectors in there, not a great idea. You don't want to do that. Learn to solder. And, the more you do it, guys, you'll get to the point where, it'll be a 5-minute job. Obviously doing this, on camera, working around the tripod, it made it a little bit more complicated. But for the most part, I can throw these connectors together pretty quick. And, you end up with a nice clean look. You get the connector you want. You don't have to worry about buying a battery with a specific connector, even though a lot of companies now, Gens Ace, for example, I know they'll do Traxxas and XT90s, and I don't even know if they still do Deans anymore. But if you have to change a connector, you can do it yourself. Invest in a soldering station. If you guys are in this hobby for the long haul, buy a quality station. Don't cheap out. You will... Trust me, if you go out and you buy a soldering iron, you start soldering, and you'll have a problem and you'll curse. You'll go out and you buy a soldering station, and you guys will say, hey, wow, this was totally worth it. My track power station was not cheap, but I use it all the time. It's a tool like, same as a drill, same as anything else. It's a tool that if you're in this hobby, you need it. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I do XT90s. It's the ones I use now. XT60s would be the same, just a little bit smaller. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll go out and start soldering. Okay? Anyways, guys, thanks a lot. Take care.